Welcome. In this video tutorial, we'll take a look at how to configure a form map. So we're going to go to the Maps button right here. And from here, we'll choose Form Map. Now, the objects that we have to map from were set up using the data modeling section. So take a look at that video. And if you want to add fields from two different objects on the same map, it's best to start with the child object. So in this case, we're using the account and opportunity. We're going to go ahead and select opportunity. Default, there'll be a name. You can change this. And form maps are best used when you want to just look at a single record for an object. And you want to be able to format the data all over the place. There's a couple layouts that you can choose from, especially if you're trying to map lots of fields. So if you take a look at the bottom right here, these are the fields that we've selected for these objects in the data modeling section as well. You'll notice these are all opportunity fields, and then we can even open up the account fields as well. So if we go ahead and click on account ID fields, you'll see that there's an indent, and here's the fields here as well. And if we wanted to display everything, we could actually just click right here, and every single field has been selected. So there's 20 fields. And what this is going to show you right here is that we're going to have 5 fields per column, and then we're going to have a space, and then the next 5 will be in the next column over. So you can play around with this. You can have 1 field per column. You can have a max of 50 fields per column, but by default, it'll be 5 fields with a column spacer of 1. So if we go ahead and drag our fields over here, let's say we want to start in C4. Notice that we have 5 fields in a column, a spacer column, the next 5, and so on and so on. You'll also notice that the default coloring in here, this is something that you can change at an app level in display options, or you can even change it at a product level. So if you want to add your own coloring in here, you'll also notice that we removed grid lines. So this is also something that you can change. To remove your fields, you can just click on this unmap section in this column right here. And by default, every field is bidirectional. So you'll notice this first section right here, display, is checked as well as save. So if you wanted to control the behavior of a field and just have it be read-only, here you can see that we've changed these 3 fields. You could also do it the other way, where you actually don't want the data coming from Salesforce to be displayed, but you want to still be able to type something in here or enter information and save it back to Salesforce. So 3 different behaviors. You can have it display and save. You can have it display only. You can have it even save only. So let's go ahead and remove these fields. Okay, we've removed the fields. Now we're going to choose the option right and down. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this is a little bit different. We're going to select everything again. And in this example, we're now displaying the data across the top. So our first field, our second field, our third field, and you'll notice it's following the same behavior, 5 fields, then it starts again here. We still kept it with a 1 spacer column, but this is the ability to use the down and right or right and down. And then I'm going to show one more way you can do this. So let's go ahead and remove these fields as well, is you can just individually map your fields. So if you don't want to do things in bulk, you can just select that field, come right here, and you'll notice it says drag a single field, and I can just lay it out. So we've dragged a single field here, and we can just do the same for the next one. So I can come in here. You'll notice with a form map, there's no restrictions on how the layout looks, so you can have the data all over the place. You can even do something like this, where you select 2, and do this as well. And this is going to follow this behavior. So a lot of different options here, depending on how many fields you're trying to map. If you want to individually map things, you absolutely can, or you can use the different layouts that we support here. And the final example in here is as you're mapping your things and you're using these layouts, you can rearrange the order right here as well. So let's say you wanted the account name first, then opportunity name, then the amount, then close date. Maybe you want the opportunity owner up further. Maybe you want to do this. So you can definitely rearrange these things. Let's add all these fields again. And I'm just going to show one last example of this where we might say 20. Come in here and map, and we can just do this. And you can see our 20 fields came into just a single column because that's what we set it right here. One other thing I'll point out is if you want to be able to, as you jump around from field to field and see the location change, you can do something called track fields. And notice here, if I jump to the stage, it's going to highlight that field, and it's also going to tell me the location of where that field is sitting. Location account 360 and section C13. So it's something that you can enable. Now that we've mapped our fields, I want to point your attention to the field options. So every field has a special treatment. So in this example, the account name is a lookup. So I actually can come in here and configure my lookup. So right here we have our account fields. If there was another field that we wanted to be able to use, we can actually just come in here and click on this plus. And here we have a list of all the fields for this object. And even if you were to look at a pick list, you can actually get a snapshot of what those pick list values are. So let's say we want to add another field. I can click OK. And now there's two things that you need to decide on. What fields you want to be able to search by or have your users search by, and what do you want displayed. So in this example, this would be, let's say you're trying to create an opportunity, you want to associate it to an account. So what's the best way for a user to find an account in Salesforce by using this screen? So I could say I want to search by the account name. I can change the operator, make it a little bit friendlier and say contains. The first column will be account name as well. I want to be able to search by maybe account type. And if I choose in, because this is a pick list, users will be able to select multiple options here. And I could say display this as well. It's going to be my second column. And then maybe a couple more things. I will say greater than or equal to, because this is a number field. I can do this as well. And then finally, I will choose one more thing in here. And if you want to change the order of how things are, you can just simply come in here, switch things around very easily. So I'll click OK. This checkbox is telling me that this has been configured. We'll look at a couple other fields. So for a pick list, you have the ability to add a color bar. So if we take a look at this right now, this field forecast category has these values. This is all coming from Salesforce. These are the default colors. And now you have a couple things that you can play around with. So you could determine that you don't want a color bar at all, and you just want a color for this one value, close lost. So this gives you that ability to have a color bar across all your different pick list values, or individually pick which ones you want the color for. We can come in here and say reset. This will just color this particular cell. And then I'll just say OK. You can do the same for any other pick list. So I can do the color bar. How a Boolean field works. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So by default, a Boolean field will come over as true, false. You can decide you want it to be represented as yes, no, 1, 0, or even custom. So I could say correct, incorrect, and Valorx will take care of the translation. So inside Salesforce, there'll still be a checkbox, but you have the ability to add your own flavor to a Boolean field. Notice that this has now been configured. So here are the different type of field options you can play around with in the form map. And then the last thing I'll draw your attention to is the display options and save options. So let's go ahead and click on display options. By default, the columns will be auto-fit based on the data that comes in. You can turn that off. You can play around with the minimum width as well. If you do want grid lines to get added back, you can absolutely do that. The last thing I'll point out is if you want the API name to be sitting right here, or if you want it to be random. So you can also play around with that. And then finally in border and color. So here is our default colors. You'll notice that it's set at default. You can decide you want no border at all, or you can decide that you want your own color. So you could come in here, make a change, and you can always reset this back. So this is changing the color for this one map. If you wanted to change this behavior for all your maps, you can do this actually in settings, and every other map that you create will be using that setting. Click OK. And then the last thing is save options. So by default, when you save records using Valorx, it'll be one API call for every 200 records. And you can control this batch size. 200 is the max, but you can lower this. You could go down to a single record. So let's say you have a trigger that you've written that was written without expecting to make bulk updates. You could change this batch size to 1. Let's just make this back to 200. And then the last thing in here I'll point out is save conditions. So Valorx will never go below your Salesforce security. So if you have validation rules, if you have required fields, all of that will be applied. Users won't be able to do something they wouldn't be able to do in the browser. But on top of that, you can come up with your own conditions. And if that condition isn't met, let's say you don't want the records to be updated or saved. So I can come in here and I could say next step and is not blank. So in order for this record to be saved, you want to make sure that the user is filling in a value for next step. So I'm saying is not blank. And you can have multiple conditions. So if I went in here and added more conditions, I can do it right here. I could have my filter logic or my condition logic, but we'll just go ahead and get rid of this. And then you can create a custom message to the user and say, please fill out next steps. Okay. So if they didn't fill out a next step, that message will be presented to them. So this is how you configure a form map. Definitely feel free and play around with it, but there's a lot to do in here, and thank you for watching this tutorial.